Welcome to Peace in Math. In this video, we'll be covering how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. When using this method, it's pretty much just a plug and chug with the formula once the equation is equal to 0, but sometimes it can get tricky when you're simplifying to get to the final answer. So let's go through two problems step by step, and at the end of the video, there'll be some extra examples for you to practice and check your solutions. Here's our first example. Now, if I want to solve this equation using the quadratic formula, it has to be equal to 0. So I'm going to move all of my terms to one side. So I'm going to take these terms on the right side, and I'm going to move them to the left. So I'm going to subtract 12x from both sides, and then I'm also going to be adding 8 to both sides. So these cancel out, so now my equation is going to be equal to 0, which is what I want. And then on the left side, if I combine all my like terms, I've got x squared. Combining these, I get 9x, and then combining these constants, I'll get 14. So now it's equal to 0, and now I can use the quadratic formula. So I'm going to list out my values for a, b, and c that I'm going to be plugging into the formula. A is my coefficient of x squared, which is 1. B is the coefficient of x, which is positive 9. And then my constant c is positive 14. Alright, so now if I plug everything into the quadratic formula, I'm going to have x equals, we're going to do opposite of b first. So opposite of positive 9. And then plus or minus square root. Under the radical, I'm going to have b squared minus 4ac. So b squared, that's 9 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and then times c, which is 14. And the whole entire thing is divided by 2 times a, which is 1. And now I'm going to do the part that's under the radical first, this discriminant. So under the square root, I've got 9 squared, which is 81. And then I've got 4 times 14, which will give us 56. And if I subtract 81 minus 56, that gives me 25. Okay, so on my next line, if I simplify this, opposite of 9, that gives me negative 9. Plus or minus square root, all of this under the radical, my discriminant came out to be positive 25. So I'll have square root of 25, which means I'm going to end up having two real solutions. And then it's all divided by 2 times a, and on the bottom, 2 times 1 just gives us 2. And if I simplify square root of 25, that will give us 5. So 9 plus or minus 5 over 2. And now I have like terms on the top that I can combine, so I'm going to combine these two. So I'm going to branch off and do two separate ones, one with the plus, one with the minus. So my first one is going to be negative 9 plus 5 divided by 2. And the second one, I'm going to do negative 9 minus 5 divided by 2. And if I simplify each of these, negative 9 plus 5 gives me negative 4. Divide that by 2 that was on bottom, and we get negative 2 as an answer. On the second one, if I do negative 9 minus 5, that gives me negative 14. Divide that by 2, and we get negative 7 as our other answer. So our final solutions for x, we get x equals negative 2 and negative 7. Here are our two solutions. Now, this equation could have actually been solved by factoring, which is much quicker. So if you're good at factoring, try that method first before doing the quadratic formula. The only thing is that not all equations will give you something that is factorable, but the quadratic formula method, that will always work. So let's take a look at one where we can't factor it, so then we'll have to end up using the quadratic formula. Okay, so let's still make this equation equal to 0 again if I want to use the quadratic formula. This time I have more terms on the right side, so I'm going to take these two terms on the left and move them over to the right. So I'm going to subtract 3x squared from both sides, and I'm also going to subtract 7. So that way everything on the left side cancels out, so I get 0 on the left side, which is what I wanted. 4x squared minus 3x squared gives us 1x squared, or just x squared. I'm going to bring down the negative 2x, and then 5 minus 7 gives us negative 2. Now this time I have something that cannot be factored. There are no numbers that multiply to negative 2 that would add up to this middle number, negative 2, so we're going to have to use quadratic formula. So let's list out our a, b, and c values. So for a, my coefficient of x squared, this would be 1, and then b, my coefficient of x is negative 2, and then c, the constant, that is also negative 2. And let's plug this all into the quadratic formula to solve for x. Alright, so plugging in, x equals, we're going to do opposite of b, so opposite of negative 2, and then plus or minus our square root, b squared minus 4ac, so I'm going to do negative 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and then times c, which is negative 2. And the whole entire thing is divided by 2 times a, and our a value is 1. And if we simplify the discriminant, this part underneath the radical first, negative 2 squared will give me positive 4, and I've got negative times negative, which gives me a positive. Do your signs first, that will sometimes help. And then I've got 4 times 1 times 2, which will give me 8. So my discriminant, if I add these, is positive 12. And since that is the positive number, that means I'm going to end up getting two real solutions. So let's continue. Opposite of negative 2 gives me positive 2, plus or minus, square root, all of this we simplify to 12. So square root of 12, and 2 times 1 on the bottom is just 2. Now this time we have a number that is not a perfect square under the radical, so let's simplify this square root of 12. And I'm going to split this up. I'm going to do square root of 4 times square root of 3. I'm choosing 4 since that's a perfect square because I can simplify square root of 4 to just 2. So this square root of 12 will simplify to 2 rad 3. If you need help simplifying radicals, check out my video on simplifying square roots if you need some extra examples. Alright, so this will be 2 plus or minus square root of 12. We simplified this to 2 rad 3. And then we had just a 2 on the bottom. And now this time, I don't have like terms to combine since this has a radical, but this one doesn't. So we cannot combine these terms on top. All we can do is see if we can simplify with the number that we have on the bottom. So each of these can be divided by 2. So we're going to simplify this. We're going to do 2 divided by 2, and then this 2 rad 3 divided by 2. So for our first term, 2 divided by 2 gives us 1, and then plus or minus. And here we can divide these numbers that are both outside of the radical. 2 divided by 2 gives us 1 again. So we get 1 rad 3, which normally we would just write this as 1 plus or minus rad 3. And here are our two solutions, which sometimes you might see this written out separately, 1 plus rad 3, and then comma 1 minus rad 3. But normally we'll just leave them as the plus or minus form. If you want some more practice, here are some extra examples for you to try. So take a second, pause the video, try to work these out on a scrap piece of paper, and at the end you can check your answers with the solutions provided. Good luck! Here's the complete list of all the answers to the practice problems. Be careful on this last one because here you had to take a square root of a negative number, so that means you are going to have two imaginary solutions, so you are going to have an I in your answer. Well, I hope this helped you practice solving using the quadratic formula, and hopefully this also helped you find a little bit of peace in math. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.